Right. Okay. So all recording now. Welcome to all and anyone that's going to listen to this video today or in the future. I'm really thrilled to have with me virtually Hamish Mackay, who's up in the Yorkshire Dales. So we're come from city to nature, so that's quite fitting. I'm not going to talk for too much because I really want to hear from Hamish today. So nature for me, as anyone that knows me knows, is completely part of me. It's part of us all, of course, but from being a little girl running around the hills, youth hosteling with my mum, I think we've been to pretty much every youth hostel in the Lake District and in Scotland, but it really gave me a sense and a connection to nature and a sense of how important nature is. And I've always gone back to it when I've really, really needed to. And a few years ago, when I hit my edge and slightly overcooked it, I did go back to nature. It took me time to go back to nature, but when I did, I felt incredibly grounded. And when I say go back to nature, I'm not being overcomplicated there. It's simple time, it's simplicity and time and quiet and stillness. And of course, in today's world, we all know that nature is forefront, it's central to the planet, to the health of the planet, it's central to us as well, and those two things are coming together. So Hamish, as we know from my post, is a leadership coach. He's a facilitator, he's a meditation teacher, he's an environmentalist. He is just a very interesting man and a friend of mine, and as I said, in many ways a mentor. I feel I learn a lot from him, and he was an original member of the Agora gang. He's also part of my circle of trust, which actually all my speakers in this series are part of my circle of trust, which are practitioners that I go to, have worked with, really trust and believe in from all different disciplines. And I've also been lucky enough to work with him when I was consulting a business called the Extraordinary Venture Club. I've now become an associate of that business. So the picture that I shared in that first post actually was very near to where I think Hamish's favourite tree is, up in Scotland. So it's a very meaningful picture to me. But passing over to Hamish. So Hamish, what led you to work in nature?
Thanks. And thanks for the intro. So what led me to work in nature? I think really, I mean, I too have had the fortune to spend a lot of time in beautiful areas outdoors, and I used to be in the army, so I spent a lot of time outdoors in the army, and my dad has a farm in Herefordshire. So it's always been a refuge for me and a place to be calm and feel connected. And then I came a bit unstuck because for much of my adult life, I think I've been following society's expectations and trying to be someone that I wasn't. And that, if you've done that before, becomes quite exhausting. It's like swimming upstream. So I recognized at one stage I was quite anxious and disconnected with myself, and had to come back to myself. And nature was, as you were saying in your intro, is basically doing that. So when we find stillness and when we go out into nature and we connect, because we're the same as nature, we're one and the same thing. When we connect with nature, we connect with ourselves. So then I've met a few people who were already working with people and nature in a kind of personal development way, and I thought, well, this is amazing. Maybe this is something that I should do, because I'd already started working as a coach at that stage, and it seemed a very natural thing to combine. Little did I know that actually that, as an approach to personal development or spiritual development, is pretty much the oldest in the world. It's like 50,000 years old. So it's way older than all of the religions. To go out into nature in an intentional way, in a sacred way, to develop yourself, to understand who you are in the grand scheme of things, is the oldest spiritual practice. And I think that, combined with increasing grief and anger and overwhelm as to what we're doing to this planet, from everything from climate change to, plastic to, and the one that gets me the most is the species extinction. these beautiful species that we've co-evolved with, every atom of us, every part of us, the water in us, the carbon in us, we've just co-evolved with all these beautiful species for millions of years, are now in the blink of an eyelid becoming extinct. So to answer your question, it just felt like a very, very appropriate and meaningful and purposeful thing to do in my own little way to combine all of those factors, to take people out into nature, to build and work on my relationship with nature, and support other people in doing the same, because I think what we love, we protect, right? So helping people sort of facilitate that relationship with nature themselves. People who are struggling, people who have lost connection somehow, lost confidence, or lost a sense of resilience, because those were all the things that I've been battling with, and continue to in some ways. So yeah.
I love what you say, saying that you protect what you love. That is so true.
Yeah.
Incredibly true. And I think what you say about, and what I was saying earlier about nature connecting to self in my yoga practice, reading the ancient texts of yoga, it is all about yoga works inwards through the 8 limbs to reach your true self, but that self is at one with nature. That sort of makes sense. So your inner self, if you work through the 8 limbs of yoga and you come to a place of complete stillness that is within, then you become the unmanifested version of yourself. So nature is essentially within us. I know that sounds quite complicated. I'm not sure if I explained that very well, but the ancient yoga texts are essentially saying what you're saying, that we right inside us are nature, and we have these different layers on top of us. We have our physical body, our subtle body, our more energetic body, and we have our koshas. But working under those layers of a good old onion, we have that true self.
I see it as as beautifully expressed. I see it as inner nature, outer nature, and true nature, which is another way of putting it. Outer nature, trees and fields and other people. Outer nature out there. Inner nature, our feelings and our thoughts and what have you. And then, as you say, that true nature, which is the formless, out of which it all arises and falls back into. And I think if we spend enough time in stillness, out in nature alone, which we can talk about more, but and with the right guidance, you start to identify with that formlessness. You start to see that, and it's really quite extraordinary.
Because you did a 28-day solo. Was it 28 days last year?
Yeah, so about 18 months ago, I spent 28 days in Colorado, alone in a circle about 100 meters across, which was a long vision quest, which is a Native American practice. And yeah, it's profound experience. Yeah, I wish everyone could spend even just a couple of days alone in nature, uninterrupted, undistracted. It's really quite life-changing.
And the work that because I know you, of course, you work in nature and you work with people in nature. And what kind of transformation have you seen when you work with people in nature? Is it very subtle and more of like long-term effects, or do you sometimes see like instantaneous or quite dramatic releases?
Yeah, I think that veil between us and, because we are nature, as you say, but even if we spend all our life in the city and behind a screen, you might think that it would take you long to reconnect with nature, but I think that veil is actually very thin. And yet at the same time, I think it can be a lifetime of investing in your relationship with nature, like any relationship, giving and receiving and spending time with. But fundamentally, I think the transformation is having an actual experience of interconnectivity and of belonging, and actually experiencing the nature of change. So we can read a book and we can watch a film and we can talk about, we can intellectualize that everything's constantly changing all the time, which is a truth, and that everything's interconnected, which is also a truth. But if we go out into nature, especially alone and especially undistracted in an intentional way, we actually experience everything changing around us the whole time. It's a very, very transparent experience of reality. And we actually experience that we're interconnected and we belong to this family of beings. And when we think we're separate, and when we think things don't change and things stay the same and they sort of get locked, in one place, or if we're sort of living in the future or living in the past, I think that's when we can get our knickers in a twist a bit. So it gives us,
One way to put it.
Right, yeah. Mine.
Yeah.
So I'm going about this in a really roundabout way, but basically the change, I think, is just getting a sense of perspective on things. Like if people, like we all do, we have a victim in us. Nature somehow lifts us up and says, look, you're not alone. You're part of us. You're part of the family of all beings. You belong here, and we get lifted up. And if we've got that part of us that says, well, I'm big and I'm arrogant and I'm everything, we just get cut down to size to say, look, actually you're tiny in the grand scheme of things. You're nothing, and yet you're everything at the same time. So I think it really, the people that I've worked with, it's just an amazing environment because nothing judges us, right? Trees don't judge us, grass doesn't judge us. It's a very conducive environment to do personal development work because we don't feel judged. Everything out there in nature is a model for a way of being. Everything is pulling us to presence somehow, to nowness, because everything is completely present. Everything is pulling us towards authenticity because everything is just itself, right? You don't look at a tree and say that's wrong somehow. It's just a tree, So everything is pulling us towards this deeply integrated state, this deep sort of sense of wholeness, because everything out there is integrated in complete harmony with itself. And human beings, because we've got these sort of faculties, amazing faculties of imagination and self-awareness, we can get ourselves into these problems, these mental problems, traps. And so really there's this constant invitation when we go out into nature just to be ourselves and to be present. So that's the transformation, I think. It's not, or it's when I take people out into nature, I work in partnership with nature, and she's working through me as I'm working with others. So it's really a way of being that I think people are drawn to. And of course, people also find insight. They might see a tree and just go, oh, there's something about the way that tree is rooted, which tells me that I need to be more rooted in my job. Or there's something about the flower, and I don't know, the 3 petals of the flower, which represents to me somehow the three parts of my business. And there's something about the way that this flower is, which I think can inspire me towards a different way of being or a different way of doing. So it's deeply personal, the meaning that we find and the symbolism and the metaphors, but they're everywhere. And even if you consider yourself not to be a particularly creative person or someone who might be naturally adept at this, you'd be very surprised, I think, if you go out undistracted in an intentional way. You'd be very surprised about what insight comes very, very naturally to you.
And I listened to an interview recently, which I shared with you, Sue Stuart-Smith, the wife of Tom Stuart-Smith, who's a very well-known landscape designer. And his wife, Sue, is a psychiatrist and very passionate about gardening. She's written a book called The Well-Gardened Mind. And in it and in the interview, she was talking about exactly what you were saying about the benefits of gardening for mental health. So gardening specifically, yes, so being out in nature, but about the change, the real change. And I remember coming to an event of yours where we came into pairs, and we asked each other, what do you think of change? And I remember going, not sure I really like change that much. Like quite habitual, do I like change? I don't know. And then we all talked, and then we asked the question again, and it was really interesting how we kind of dropped down a layer and we're like, oh, hang on a second, there's change all around us every single second of the day. And I found that such a powerful realization. But as you say, and as Sue Stuart Smith also speaks of, it's that change in nature, which is very grounding and also is in us all the time. Through the seasons we change, our energy levels change through the day. So there's these cycles, and actually just noticing and being aware of that and knowing that it's out there, it kind of, as you say, grounds and puts us more into perspective. But conscious of time, just giving people like a little snippet and window. Two things.
Yes.
The magic, the magic qualities of nature, the ground. In one of your recent newsletters, you were talking about grounding, earthing, the power of the soil. Could you speak just for a couple of minutes on that? And then the last thing, for us London folk, city folk, town folk, wherever you might be, where your outdoors is not a field, but you may have, like I do, a common nearby.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would suggest that we could do? And exercise, maybe we could do, I hate to call it sort of exercise, but you know what I mean, like a thought that we could take away and try out. So soil and thought.
And I think they're two related. I mean, they're both related, those. So yeah, there's a lot of science now about grounding. So basically, there's life force and everything. There's chi everywhere, life force in the ground, in the air, in the water, what have you. So if we take our shoes off when we go into nature, or just just out on the lawn, for example, we receive that chi in a more direct way. We're going to be receiving it anyway. So when you feel relaxed, when you go out and you're walking in the park and you come back, or just walk the dog, whatever, you feel relaxed. A lot of that is because you've been inviting the chi into your body, the life force into your body, right? But if you walk barefoot, then you are inviting that chi in, and that has extraordinary anti-inflammatory qualities and can help your health in all sorts of ways. But it also just regulates your well-being and your energy and your sense of self and your sense of connection. And the more that that's circulating rather than being blocked, the healthier we are, the healthier our immune systems are, and what have you. There's lots of evidence now to suggest that. So that can be a really, really simple practice to do. And in the winter, if you get some shoes which are natural fiber, so cotton or leather soled shoes, you can walk out in those, because the rubber somehow impacts the chi coming in. But I think really simply, all I would suggest is, just connecting in a really authentic and respectful way, because we tend to take from nature the whole time. We need to come back into relationship with it. So giving our love, our appreciation, and our gratitude back to nature, back to a tree, with all of our senses, alone, undistracted, with our shoes off, and in a really slow and intentional way. If you can remember all of that, then you're going to receive the benefits of nature really, really profoundly and very beautifully. Even if it's just a pot plant in your home, just spending time conversing with it. You can talk out loud, and that everything in nature just listens in a very respectful and present way, and that in itself has a healing quality, just to share our problems with natural beings.
Well, I'm gonna get myself a pot plant, and my hubby's gonna think I'm losing my marbles as he comes down and I have my daily conversation. But I know what you're saying. I completely hear what you're saying. Hamish, thank you. I know that I could talk and talk and talk, because it's a topic that I know that we're both so passionate about, and you speak so eloquently. I could just listen and listen. But I'm going to bring it to a close, and then I will share this recording. And then also, if you don't mind, I might share your website where people can subscribe to your newsletter, because as you know, because I pretty much every time I receive it send you a response with something about it, because you managed to send such incredibly interesting and profound and insightful articles and little videos and snippets. I still dying to watch the fungi video. I mean, the trailer blew my mind on that. But thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Hamish, and have a lovely day all.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.